Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum starts its operation. My name is Vasil Samakhvalov, and now we will be talking about gender balance, but not just gender balance, but gender balance in management positions in media. What's going on there as of today in Ukrainian media? So our speakers today are Kateryna Levchenko, Government Commissioner for Gender Policy, Roman Lyubchenko, Deputy Country Director for IFES in Ukraine, and Lisa Kuzmenko, Head of Women in Media NGO and member of the Commission on Journalism Ethics. So, Ms. Kateryna, let's start with you. So she sets the tone. Then we proceed to Mr. Roman. And then there will be an interesting presentation by Ms. Lisa. Thank you very much, Mr. Vasil. Thank you, dear colleagues, for this opportunity to take part in this event. The opportunity to present such an important survey about gender balance in decision-making in media organizations of Ukraine. This survey is preceded by my introduction, and it's an important thing for me because gender policy, or in other ways, policy of ensuring equal rights for men and women, is a responsibility of all of the executive authorities, all regional administrations in all areas of government management, in culture, in information policy, and in media, which is more of a self-regulated sector, but state policy is exercised not only by government authorities, but also by civil organizations, international organizations, business organizations, and for me it's a positive example of the way the politics emerge in different sectors. So when I was preparing this introduction, I was thinking what media sphere free of stereotypes should look like. How to briefly describe it in that way. Undoubtedly, this survey gives a lot of answers to this question, and I will leave these answers for those who were preparing this survey, but I've identified an indicator for myself, the one that I suggest to use in the future. I would like the term weak gender related to media, just related to women, just to disappear from our media. It's a simple indicator, but very demonstrative one. There is a lot of content in it. First of all, women are no weak gender. And it's being proved in everyday life. And not only there, but by those achievements that women make. I cannot help but, for example, give an example of data about the number of women in the armed forces of Ukraine. More than 40,000 of them, 5,000 of them are right in the front lines. The women who keep working, who maintain the economy together with the men, they are not excluded from other spheres of life. And last year, when I was going on a business trip, I was seeing women with children, with huge bags, with the carts. That image of a strong woman, it was right in front of my eyes, and calling them weak gender is a distortion of social reality we live in. And for what I understand, media is supposed to help us not to distort, but rather to create a real image of what we have. So this indicator will be very important in terms of illustration of a degree to which media can be free of gender stereotypes. Just like 20 years ago, I was thinking that an indicator of implementation of gender policy will be ramps on the roads for the people who use the wheelchairs or who drive the wheel cart, to allow them to move whenever they want. So in the media today, this indicator, this term, weak gender, should just disappear from our use. And another thing I would like to focus on is the fact that gender mainstreaming demonstrated by this survey does not mitigate our discourse about the rights of women. We have to understand it's called the policy for ensuring equal rights for men and women, and working and developing different amendments to regulations, developing different programs, we talk about discrimination against men as well. But unfortunately, there are more inequalities related to women in our society. This is why gender equality policy does not cancel the policy of ensuring women's rights. And this survey that we're having, it very demonstrates the symbiosis of these two areas of policy, and I hope that the results will be perceived seriously by the management of the media organizations that will definitely improve the coverage in this area. Let's proceed to Mr. Roman, thanks to whom we maintain gender balance right in front of you. Well, it was a predictable joke, but I'm not here for this reason. I would really like to greet our partners and colleagues from the organization Women in Media. This survey is very important in our opinion. I represent the International Foundation of Election Systems, and since 1994 we build democracy in Ukraine. You can see what we do right here in the election processes, as it's clear from our name. But when we do it, we always think about equal rights for all the participants of all the processes in all phases. We think about why women do not want to take part in elections campaigns so frequently, to become candidates, to take government offices, why the decisions are made to vote in for a candidate no matter their position on the or their opinion on the equal rights of men and women, and what we can do to improve all those processes. Ms. Kateryna mentioned that gender equality is the responsibility of all the government authorities, civil organizations, and basically the civil society. And I want to add that it's also our future, because we're moving towards the European Union, and those elements are a part of a composition of this important component of this democratic union, and they will become our future too. So we have to pay more and more attention to those details. We will see those shortly during following years when Ukraine becomes a full-fledged member of European Union. And I cannot say it's the first step, but it's a very important step, specifically in the media sphere, and we are happy to support this survey. It became possible for us thanks to the financial support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Canada. It's the traditional partner of Ukraine, which supports different processes here, including gender inclusivity matters. We hope to continue this cooperation. And I was checking through this presentation, not presentation, but survey, and I think it has a lot of elements that we can continue working on, something that we will take as a reference point, and we will measure our progress based on them. Thank you very much. So let's pass the microphone to Miss Lisa. I know there are different stereotype hypotheses that technical professions in the media are usually male and the journalists are usually female professions. I don't know how these stereotypes correspond with the reality, so let's check it out from your survey. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the Commissioner on Equal Rights and IFES Ukraine for their support on every phase of this survey. Otherwise, this survey would not be possible, so I hope our cooperation will continue in different formats. So today we're presenting these results, the results of this survey, and it's important to mention that it's one of the first, or maybe the first survey in Ukraine on the representation of men and women in our media management, and it's based on the indicator used by the European Institute of Gender Equality. So we've taken European experience as an example for us. So we've surveyed 173 representatives of Ukrainian media from 168 Ukrainian media. They were different by type. They were printed media, online media, TV, and they were different in terms of their coverage, like nationwide media, for example, Suspilne broadcaster representatives were filling ICTV, 1+1, the biggest media, and also regional and hyper-regional media who also participated in filling this questionnaire. And what we've seen, well, talking about the ownership of the media, yes, there's a lot of women working in Ukrainian media. They really take a lot of management positions, but the owners of the media are mostly men. 38 of those surveyed said that the owners are the men. And there's a lot of answers that a final beneficiary who's is not a man or woman but a business. Also, it's important to mention whether the final beneficiary is involved in the operational activities. So it's not like the men are nominal owners, they also take part in the decision making in media. We've also seen that women are not represented in those positions that contemplate strategical planning in regional media. And some organizations of regional media don't even contemplate a large number of people working there. It's like 2 or 3 persons. And in 17 regional media, there are no women represented in management positions at all. Also, we've noticed a tendency that if more than 2 people are represented in management position, it increases the risk of gender misbalance. In other words, the more positions are in media, the bigger the chance that women will be represented less in the management positions. We've also noticed that the size of a media influences not only the representation of the media, but also a workload on the women. Some women may take a number of management positions at a time, which results in a lack of operational resource. Some positions say that, some media say that due to the full-scale invasion, which resulted in decreasing of advertising services, there was a huge decrease in funding of media, and men just don't want to work for such a small reimbursement, and the media are left only with women. Also, we were asking about the standard operating policies of the organizations, and more than a third of representatives said that their organizations don't have any formalized equality policy. 34% mentioned that. What's also important in those organizations where equality policies were in place, the least widespread policy, well, Ms. Kateryna, you were mentioning about women's leadership, so it's the least widespread policy. Also, talking about the availability of policies, we were asking whether there were any trainings on tolerance, gender equality, non-discrimination held in those media. 68% said that within the last year there were no such trainings at all. Also, we were receiving such comments from the participants who started filling this questionnaire. Well, they were surprised to see that question generally, but they were saying it was interesting for them. They would like to implement the gender equality policies in their media, which means that media are not against the gender equality. They just didn't have enough resource or time to focus on that matters. And what's important, the mobilization of men also influences the gender composition of the media. So it's one of the key things that influences the results of this survey. So before we proceed to recommendations, I would like to urge, or I would like to share this information that we have Ukrainian and English version. If you proceed through this QR code, you can find both versions downloadable. And the most important conclusions from this survey is that there is a lack of systemic actions on the government level that would assist or support the media in inviting the women to the decision-making positions, which support could be expressed as the special exemptions, which could be important for regional media. We also have the representatives of Ministry of Culture and Information Policy here. We previously represented or presented the gender equality indicators in media, and it's important for them to be implemented. And in our opinion, leadership in this area could be taken by Suspilny broadcaster to implement those indicators at least at their level. And it's also important to remember about the education of the media personnel. We don't have any single gender equality course for media specialties. However, it would be important to organize one starting from the first year of education as a special course, not as a faculty or extracurricular course. And Ms. Kateryna mentioned about self-regulation today. This survey is important for the media reform in Ukraine. We have a new law on media, which is something that allows media to self-regulate, to adopt the code of conduct, and which would assist to gender equality in media. So it's in brief. I invite everybody to get familiarized with the survey on our website. Thank you very much. So my first question is, you've mentioned the self-regulation. You mentioned that a third of all of the media collectives don't have formalized rules, don't have standard operating procedures about selecting their management, selecting their collectives, making their composition. Thank you very much, Mr. Vasil. You know, listening to Lisa, I was thinking not about what's important to say here, and my answer is right to your question. I think that it's important to develop such a joint module or model document called Standard Gender Equality Policy for Media. It could be, well, we have a lot of examples on the government level when we develop standard operating procedures, standard rules, standard instructions that are taken as the example by every specific authority, every specific office, every specific agency. You know, they adapt them to themselves, but if there is a gender equality principle mentioned there, so they all adhere to it. So I invite everybody to develop such a standard document that will really be of help. Then another thing is the matter of education. What I would like to say is that within the last couple of years, implementation of gender education on a government level is covered by the State Service Agency, the higher school of training of government officials. I understand that the media representatives are no government officials, but as a proposition, let's talk about it. The Ministry of Culture and Information Policy should be interested in it, in development of courses for the representatives of press services, press offices of the state organizations, state agencies, and then in coordination with international civil organizations, we already have this practice when the trainings are developed not only for those who are the representatives of local governments or central government agencies. Why I'm mentioning the State Service Agency? Because it's a good level of digitalization in terms of creating of such trainings, their organization, and it's also an opportunity to reach out to a wide circle of participants. Just a small comment. I've just thought that we have the national strategy for mitigation of salary gaps, and the plan of actions contemplate participants and timelines, but we don't have the strategy for gender equality in media. If we don't have policy, all those typical documents, they also have nothing to, no documents to have connected them with. Maybe in continuation of such idea of yours, it would be of help. Well, I support the development of a state strategies. We have the state strategy for ensuring equal rights for men and women as a framework document until the year 2030, but it gives a good imagination about the gender problems and about the gender gaps, gender inequality, because it's not always a discrimination. Gender equality is not an expression of discrimination, but sometimes it is. I would also like to mention the strategy of gender equality in education that was adopted, that covers the information and content component. If we talk about media sphere, such a strategy can be developed in coordination with the responsible authorities, the responsible government agencies, but also it can be developed based on the self-organization of media. I have to mention the strategy of gender equality in the system of free aid, because those strategic documents, they help identify for every sector, identify the main areas of work for them. And I'm just back from a business trip to a European Council. There was a meeting on gender equality, and we've finalized the project of the gender equality of the European Council until the year 2029. It will be handed over to the Cabinet of Ministers of the European Council. And support of media, countering sexism, is seriously covered in this strategy. And it's important to have those documents implemented further on, because we don't write policies just to have them written, but to have them implemented. And what's important, it can be on the level of self-organization, because if there are interested people who will move this document on, that will be very important. So this is exactly what I was meaning. Like, there are no obstacles for the media to get together and to vote for those procedures. Well, your question was how to deal with this, so now we're present during one of the elements of how we can start this process. It's very important. In my opinion, very important was the comment from Miss Lisa when she was making the presentation, that media when they were reading the question, they were realizing the situation. And I think it's important to tell them all those things in this way, because we realize, well, sometimes we realize that what's obvious for a professional is not obvious for other audience, and it's important, in my opinion, to have this connection between reality and the profession, and it's a very good stimulus for this. Thank you very much. I'm having one more question. Dear journalists, please raise your hands and we'll proceed to you shortly. So my question is, how relevant now is and how important is this survey? You see, now the mobilization is going on, as you've mentioned, and the job market is pressing on the situation in the media. A lot of things are changing, and can it happen that within half year or a year, situation will change just drastically? In my opinion, mobilization does not cancel their survey about all those remarks that are related to mobilization. They are all emphasized, highlighted there, and we should continue researching this issue. I would say that the war is going on since the year 2014, so we can talk since 2014 that we have mobilization going on. Well, I know a number of media which are headed by women right now. Yes, exactly, this is what we're saying, that the women take management positions because of the war and the decrease of the advertising market, and only women accept to take those positions with such a low salary. I would like to answer this question from another angle without repeating what was said. So within the last couple of weeks, there was a number of studies published that were related to the new tendencies in the job markets. And on one hand, the women replace men in those positions where they really didn't work before. We call them difficult and unhealthy, well, not only for women but for men as well. And since the year 2017, the list of 450 professions that were prohibited for women was cancelled, and it was right, because otherwise we just conservate the society and make some economic achievements without developing the manufacturing system itself. So there is a procedure to replace mobilized men with women, but on the other hand, the same surveys identified a high level of resistance of the management of enterprises to have women hired or to have people with disabilities hired. Veterans who returned from the front lines, and it evidences that the economic sector did not adapt to the reality we're having. And what's important there is to implement proper communication strategy, communication policy in this sphere. And the Ministry of Economy, you mentioned the strategy for mitigating the salary gaps created by the salary upon fulfillment of our obligations for joining Biarritz partnership. So they're developing specific steps to mitigate the salary gaps, to increase the opportunities for men and women and people with disabilities as well to be equal subjects in the economic sector. So, you know, Mr. Vasil, I wouldn't be afraid to have women brought to those positions previously occupied by men, but that after the victory, as it always happens after the war, there will be a recoil from those positions. I cannot say it's an achievement, but if a person works, they have good salary, they have a good job, they are economically free, and economic freedom provides opportunities for political and social freedom. So the World War I and World War II demonstrated that within a couple of years after their end, the situation was deteriorating with economic capabilities of women. So today this topic is one of the priorities if we talk about different aspects of gender policy. And how to not make it happen is a matter not only of economic nature but also of social, our social responsibility. And the last sentence I like to recall to give this example with the Nobel Prize laureate Claudia Godel, Nobel Prize in Economics, for this research on gender misbalance in economic sector, and the main conclusion that we should learn, that all the neoliberals in economy should learn, that economic inequality is not related with economic structures, it's related with social structures. This is why without the changes in social structures, without positive steps taken by the governments, we won't be able to move to the equal opportunities society, equal opportunities for everybody. So it's not only related to women but also to other categories such as people with disabilities. Well, unpleasant conclusions for certain categories of economists. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I would like to thank Lisa for this invitation. I'm the head of OSCE project in media. Well, dear colleagues, you're doing a very good job. I've heard this idea about the strategy in media. We are ready to support it. We are ready to cooperation. I'm inviting you to the office of OSCE in January. I hope we can talk through this strategy because it's extremely important. Thank you very much. So let's proceed to questions. Good afternoon, Viktor Gritsenko, freelancer journalist. You were mentioning the strategy for implementation of gender equality in Ukrainian media, and I would like to ask, there are such examples when management positions are taken by the women in one media. I'm not going to call the name because I don't want it to look like an offense on the media. So they have 16 women together with the founder and the editor-in-chief, and there are only 2 men in their organization, one of whom is a journalist. It's a relatively new media. Well, they gather forums, and for what I understand, at the expense of the grants, and they have a capability to pay good salaries to their employees. So in cases like that, how can we counter the gender inequality? And a question to Miss Lisa. I was asking you this question in Facebook, but you blocked me. Well, it's an unexpected turn right here. Well, I'm asking without aggression, right? So do you think that that question is irrelevant or provocative? Because I was not really expecting such a reaction. Thank you. The microphone is right there. So I blocked you for that question? I will unblock you. That's because it's a wonderful question. I think I'm blocking people only because there are questions of other nature, so it might have been a mistake. Well, I call the name of that media there in your comments in Facebook, but I'm not going to call their name too. Well, I shouldn't block you, definitely. Well, it's a media with a lot of women working there. Well, Miss Kateryna has an answer. Well, I apologize. So is it considered to be a gender misbalance or is it gender discrimination? Well, the representation, the unequal representation of men and women in any sector, in any agency, any organization, is a gender inequality, gender misbalance, because different number of men and women working somewhere. Well, we don't have any mechanisms implemented in different other countries. You know, the gender quotes, not only in media but other organizations too. It's the most popular question in the countries of European Union for the time, where a lot of corporations, financial institutions, private institutions implement gender quotes to ensure the representation, the equal representation of men and women, because traditionally the representation of men is not disputed anywhere, and such quotes are implemented on the level of 50-50 or 40 to 60 or 30 to 70%, not less or not more of representatives of certain gender, and it's considered that 30% already lets or allows the promotion of interests of that group of people. So that's the first thing. If we want to regulate it, I don't know whether it's necessary, but such instrument does exist. Talking about discrimination nature or non-discrimination nature, if we talk not only about media but in the schools, for example, 95 or 97% of teachers are women. Well, primary school are all women, right? Well, is it discrimination or not? Well, it's surprising, but it's a discrimination of women because it's related to the salary. So if the salaries in that sector grow, this ratio will change. I mean, the representation of men and women, because among the school directors the percentage of men is way higher than among the teachers, and this is one of the expressions of the gender misbalance. So that's yet another issue that requires being researched. So representation of women among social workers, nurses, teachers, it's a matter of inequality, paying less for the same job. So talking in terms of International Organization of Labor, and the last thing I would like to mention, that when we say that women should take part in political processes or management of the media, in my opinion, we're saying so just because the women are human too. I personally always leave an ethical aspect outside the equation. Like, women should take part in those processes because they're more ethical or something like that. No, it's not so. Yes, the representation of women can make operation of an organization better because we have a diversity in practice, but it's not necessarily so, and we can give a lot of examples of that. But one example is not an illustration of the system. So when we say that we had many women taking some top-level offices, yes, they were, but we know all of them by name, but we don't know all the men by their names. And no one sets the criteria for the men who take those offices. So let's not simplify the situation or oversimplify it. But when such surveys are made, they are devoid of instructional component. Let me add just a couple of things. Thank you for this question. It's a very relevant question, in my opinion. And to support what Kateryna Borisovna has just said, there are really a lot of media where women have top offices and they have gender stereotypes and they can also discriminate. It doesn't necessarily mean that as soon as a woman takes a management position, Well, they also live in our society and they can have their stereotypes too. Kateryna Borisovna mentioned the politicians, the female politicians, when Tymoshenko was nominated for a presidential office. She was writing a column for Kyiv Post that if Tymoshenko becomes a president, will it ensure gender balance in our politics? But then Yulia Tymoshenko herself was protesting against the Istanbul Convention. So after this presentation, I will unblock you and we will find joint solution. Thank you. So maybe the last question related to media and the others, as Mr. Roman has mentioned, we are striding towards European Union and we're taking a number of obligations. And as Ms. Kateryna said, there are government tools. If I'm not mistaken, in France, the companies are supposed to publish the salaries for the positions for the men or women, and if the salaries are different, the company is being penalized. So the question is, self-regulation is good, but to what extent the government should use a whip to make order or to arrange our society in a gender equal way? A very good question. I would like to say that first, before using a whip or a gingerbread, you are supposed to train, you're supposed to make people aware, to provide them with information. Lisa and Mr. Roman and me, we relate to that example that Lisa was making. Many media would like to improve their gender equality policies, but at the same time they never knew such thing can be done. So currently I think that it's important for us to have good information campaign, proper information campaign. We have to learn mechanisms that exist in other countries. I was studying the experience of Great Britain, you've mentioned France, and in Great Britain every company where more than 200 personnel work, they are obliged to publish the information about salary gaps for men and women on an annual basis. Unfortunately, the branches, the foreign branches of British companies are not obliged to do so. And I was thinking that this is, so, as Rudyard Kipling was saying, gentlemen to the west of Suez Channel is different from the gentleman in the east from Suez Channel. Yes, right, but we, I think, are currently in that sphere on the level of surveys, on level of communication, on level of formatting the conscious. Because imagine the reaction of the owners if it will be announced that from the 1st of January it's necessary to disclose such information. I think that this step won't be in advantage of gender balance, but if we implement some education campaigns with the representatives of media sphere so it's covered properly, and I am an active reader of everything that can be read, sometimes I'm surprised about how a name of a publication can be formulated that is not related to the content, and the content is even interesting, but there is a gender challenge in the title itself. So I think it's not the best way to draw someone's attention in a way like that, like about the blondes or brunettes or young women or the weak gender. So all those things are supposed to be a part of standard operating procedures related to gender balance. Miss Lisa, Mr. Roman? Well, I just want to say that this is a mainstream issue. When we were preparing this survey, we were trying to find information. Where can we get the data? We could use different methods. We were asking the representatives of the media themselves, but first we've asked the National Council on broadcasting, we've asked them, like, you're supposed to have the data, and they said, we want to make a gender profile of Ukrainian media and we would like to do it. We've started the questionnaires, but we don't want how to describe that data. And using this opportunity, I would like to announce that in continuation of this survey, we've developed, in coordination with the National Broadcasting Council, a gender profile of Ukrainian media that will be presented on the 19th of January. I think it's a practical continuation of this survey. And in continuation of this, I will say that in this building on the 24th of November, we will present the gender profile of Ukraine. You see, we're following the right courses. There is the general strategy of gender equality, and then we talk about the branch strategies or sector strategies, and right here we will talk about the gender profile of Ukraine, which will undoubtedly not take into account such things that are related to certain spheres. So we're inviting everybody on the 24th of November, 12 o'clock. So let's wrap up on this note. We would like to thank our guests for a very important conversation. We found out a lot of new things. See you shortly.
Можна нам ще одну